Give me 1 sec to get a path for the recording. Okay. All right, so hello and welcome. My name is Jeremiah. I'm the Technical Support and Training Manager here at WIN-911. Today we're going to be talking about how to set up WIN-911 and OPC, best practices, and some troubleshooting notes. And I'll do a live demo at the end here for you. So this is the overview. We're going to go over the alarm notification overview, WIN-911 customer application, software installation and licensing, where do you want to install WIN-911, preparing for the application and some terminology. And we'll talk about the OPC config, setting up alarms, doing an import, and I'll mention the advanced software license. That's an option to everybody, and then do that demo and talk about troubleshooting. All right, so this is a basic alarm notification overview. If you're already running WIN-911, I'm sure this might be something that's common knowledge to you, but for anybody that might be new or hasn't set it up, we're going to go over this from the beginning. So you got your control systems, your SCADA, right, whatever SCADA you're using. Today we're talking about OPC, but this path is the same regardless. So regardless of the SCADA, alarm goes off, start notifications, and in WIN-911 we're setting up who we want to notify. Are they available? That's the schedules. How do you want to notify them, right? With voice or an SMS message, an email, or the new mobile app. And then we have some escalation protocol and some checking if it's acknowledged or not. And it can just keep looping around, keep contacting people as long as you want, or you can acknowledge it and stop that strategy. All right, so some options here. We have the 4 different notifier options with two-way notification. We have our new mobile app, SMS messages that you can use an SMS modem with a provider in your area. We've got some voice options for voice over IP, our new GrandStream device that we're selling, and analog phone lines. The old option was the tapping modems, but those are old and kind of going out of style, and I don't think Multitech even makes them anymore. They've been hard to come by lately. So, and of course, email through SMTP or secure email channels. All right, so software installation and licensing. Here is a resource page. We have plenty of documentation on our website and YouTube videos and KB articles and everything you should need. If you need to figure out how to do the licensing, we got a video on that. Product comparison spreadsheet, technical documents, all this can just be reached from our WIN-911 page. And the V7 import utility guide is up there as well in case you're using the old V7 and want to get upgraded to our latest software. So where to install WIN-911? It's pretty easy with OPC. A lot of other SCADAs, you have to be installed on that actual SCADA server, or at least have the files from an installation of like Factory Talk or InTouch or something else that we can access those files. But with OPC, you can do it directly on the OPC server, install WIN-911 right there, or it can be on another machine that's remote, but it's on that same network, so they can talk to each other. Ideally, I'll let you know just from a troubleshooting standpoint and my experience with OPC, it's always much easier if you can just install WIN-911 directly on the OPC-DA server. When it's installed remotely, that's when you get into kind of some ugly issues with Windows DCOM and permissions and accessing things remotely. It can get much more complicated, but you'd only need one license, ideally right there on the OPC server, or it can be done on a remote machine. This is just an architecture of 2 OPC servers with a single WIN-911 system. So if you have more than one source, right, a source is what we're calling an OPC server, more than one alarming source, you'd have one installation of WIN-911, and that takes care of the included single server of OPC, and then you would just purchase an additional node for that secondary one. And basically you're just creating a new entry in the WIN-911 workspace as a new alarming source for that secondary server, but it would require a node license to get that second OPC server's alarms. All right, preparing for the application. So this is just a quick overview. OPC, that's your data source, talks to the dispatcher. Dispatcher talks to reporting, and reporting can request information from OPC as well to get values for tags or alarm points. The dispatcher is also going to handle that advanced call-out escalation and send those alarm notifications to the notifier type you've selected, right? Voice, email, SMS, or the mobile app. And then that two-way notification, you can actually send the acknowledgement back, receive the alarm acknowledgement, and it'll process back to the dispatcher. OPC is the only one that doesn't ACK all the way back to OPC on the server side. And the reason that is basically we create the alarm in WIN-911 for OPC. So all the other SCADAs, they have their own alarm database or tag database, and the alarm goes active and it sends that full alarm to us. And when we acknowledge back into the SCADA and can actually ACK it there on the SCADA HMI screen or whatever you're looking at in that data source. With OPC, all WIN-911 gets is an updated value. That's what OPC sends us. It says this tag ID is a value of 1, or whatever the case may be, right? And you build the alarm itself inside WIN-911, and when that value of 1 equals your alarm settings for that is in alarm, it's generated as an alarm from WIN-911. So you can acknowledge back and figure that out in WIN-911, but it's not going to go back to the OPC source and then ACK it there. All right, so then talking about define the alarms you're interested in, right? So you don't want to just send everything to WIN-911. You want to try to plan out and schedule and organize, do a little bit of administrative work on the SCADA side, on your OPC side, and figure out what you want to send updates to for WIN-911 to see, right? So this is just an example. You know, are you interested in compressor mode overload, low pressure, system check, refill coolant, anything that you actually want WIN-911 to notify on? This is an example of a notification schedule, right? So you have some text, an engineer, and a manager, and you can see the schedules here. Shift for days. You can select a different time, make your own schedule for each person, apply that schedule to each connection, and have an escalation process of hey, if Frank got it and Ryan got it, and they still haven't acknowledged it or nothing's been done, it can go ahead and move up the chain to the next person in the call out list, and eventually end up at a manager or somebody that probably shouldn't have to get it, but needs to get it if nobody else did something about that alarm. All right, here's just a quick snapshot of system alarm list, right? So on the left side, you have your tags that you're interested in seeing. You've pulled those into WIN-911. That's what we are going to notify on. And you can see each one of those individually is going to be sent to a strategy. And we'll talk about, if you're not familiar with a strategy or a tactic, we'll talk about that in just a minute here. But each alarm has its own strategy setting. So where is it going? What set of rules is it going to follow once we get the alarm in WIN-911? That strategy has what's called a tactic assigned to it, and that's who to notify. And it could be your entire list of people or a specific group of people, and an escalate if is basically you can put some timers, some delay after of the notifications. If it's been 10 minutes and it has not been acknowledged, you can have another person in the list that it goes down and continues to contact people. So now we'll get into the terminology here that I'm talking about. So the alarms, obviously what happened, that triggers a strategy, and that's basically a set of policies or rules for when to take action on that alarm. And then the strategies utilize a tactic. And that tactic is the call out list. That's who you want to get notified. So here's an example of a basic strategy. This is just a screenshot straight from our WIN-911 workspace, and you can see the name. You can give it whatever name you want, description, whatever description you want, and then the set of policies down at the bottom here. So initial event, that is kind of exactly what it sounds like. You know, did we get an update from OPC? That's the initial event. And if that initial event means that it's an alarm, right? Let's say that you set the OPC alarm value of 1 is an alarm and 0 is out of an alarm. We got a 1, that's the initial event. That starts tactic, basic maintenance. And remember that tactic is the call out list, so it's going to start notifying people. Then you have some different options in here. Any alarm state change, re-notify, right? So that's if it goes inactive, right? Returns to normal, no longer an alarm. We can re-notify those people that were notified in the original tactic list, let them know that it's back to normal. And then the stop condition here, alarm becomes acknowledged, stop that strategy. So that's basically saying as soon as somebody acknowledges it, stop the call out. We don't need to bother anybody else. We're good to go. So some more terminology here. We have some delays and retries. What does that mean? Basically in the tactic, you can see here the snippet on the right, that's straight from the workspace. Again, you have your list of people that you want to be notified and on which notification method. So you can see there's some emails in there for Bob, Alice, Joe, and then a phone for a voice, and then Michael back to email. And the delay before notification, starting at the top, that's basically just, you know, this alarm needs to be an alarm for 5 minutes before it starts calling out. So that's pretty useful if you have some real chatty or flapping on and off alarms. If you want to make sure that that thing stays active for at least a minute, right, or 5, or whatever your use case is going to be for your environment, it'll stay active for that amount of time and then start going down the call out list. So that's what the delay before is. Now the next option down, repeats, that is for the entire list here, right? So repeat 0, it goes from Bob down to Michael, and it's done. You put 1 repeat, it's going to go Bob through Michael, back up Bob through Michael again. Okay, so that's just repeating the entire list. And then inside the call out list, we have retries. So that is only upon a failure. Okay, that's key. That is not a repeat. That's not going to Bob twice with 1 retry. Only upon a failure where that email mail server, that SMTP server did not respond, didn't accept the email, whatever the failure was, it'll retry it 1 time. And that delay between retries, exactly what it sounds like. If it sends it out, fails, and you have 1 minute delay, it'll wait 1 minute and then try it again for that retry. And then of course the delay after. So that is just after it's successfully sent to Bob, wait 0 minutes, it goes right to Alice, and then it goes right to Joe, and then the on-call phone. The on-call phone has a delay of 10 minutes. So once somebody answers that phone call, if they did not acknowledge it and nobody else acknowledged it, it's going to wait 10 minutes and then email the last person, Michael. All right, so bringing it all together. Alarms, that's a little snippet of the OPC screen where you set up the alarm on the left, triggers a strategy. That strategy calls out a tactic, and that's a set of policies. And that tactic is the call out list itself. All right, so now we'll get into the OPC setup. So when you first go into the OPC sources in the workspace, right, we're in the WIN-911 workspace and we're setting up, you know, what are we talking to? What are we getting alarms from? You're going to have these fields there. So name, that's just user defined, whatever you want to call it. Description, whatever you want to call it. And then the machine name is going to be where that OPC server is located. Is it on the local host where WIN-911 is? Or is it on a remote machine? And you might have to type in an IP address or a host name. And then finally, server class. So server class, this should automatically be browsed for and populated, and I'll show you guys that in the demo at the end. But a lot of these, we're using Kepware as an example because that's the easiest. It's what we've tested the most with. It's reliable. It's pretty easy to set up. And but a lot of these, if you're using, some other, Delta V or ClearScape or some other OPC server, those server classes can get long and ugly really quick. And instead of copying and pasting or typing out, 30 characters for a connection string there for server class, there is a browse function. And then there is the install checklist there, the link at the bottom left. If you go to our website and just go to resources documentation, there's an install checklist for OPC, and it covers all this in much more detail. But that's pretty much it for the source, right? That's what we're connecting to. Then we get into the option to import, right? So you can see we went from sources tab over to the import tab, and you can select that OPC source that you just set up, and it'll populate with any of the tags that it can actually see, right? So this is kind of jumping ahead into some troubleshooting stuff, but sometimes you can connect to the source, but you can't import alarms, or this screen is blank, or you can't see all of them. Unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with all of the different extenuating circumstances and different settings for different OPC servers. Sometimes the enumeration isn't available. Sometimes there's like a flat compression and it doesn't let us see it. There's a lot of things that happen that are beyond our control that OPC server could not be serving up the information that we need. So that's when we would work with you could work with us, and we would tell you to get the vendor involved, whoever owns this OPC server, to get some help. But sometimes you won't be able to see the tags for import. And in that case, again, if we can't figure it out or the vendor can't figure it out, you can always add these alarms manually. We'll get into that in the demo, but just be aware of that. If you don't see any alarms in the import, there's a problem with communicating to that OPC server and the server serving up that information. But assuming all is working just fine, when you get the alarm list in here, you can check the box next to the ones you care about, and then you can see at the bottom that strategy field is what you want to assign these alarms to. Which strategy are they going to? So a lot of times people will import everything and not change the strategy, and it's pointed to the default, and then their call out list isn't being obeyed and they don't know why. Well, you got to make sure each alarm is pointed to the right strategy from the beginning. You can do that manually after you've imported, but it's much easier to assign them all. Let's say you have 200 tags, assign them all to the right strategy with the import instead of manually going one by one after you've imported them. Quick note on the advanced software license here. So we have the 3 license levels: standard, interactive, advanced, and you can see on the comparison screen here, the advanced, you're going to get more smartphone apps for the mobile app, 25 instead of 10, which is included in the interactive. You can also get report pushes and access to the advanced tactics and strategies. That's the big option there that some people might want to take advantage of. You can make much more complex escalation protocols and some rules in there for who to notify and when. We do have a video on that as well, and that will be linked right there, license comparison video. This is just a quick snapshot of an advanced tactic. So in contrast to what we just saw as a basic tactic with the call out lists going down the row, this is a drag and drop workflow creation. And you can get real dynamic and real complicated and make these pretty crazy if you wanted to. But you have all sorts of roles and labels and this drag and drop workflow for who to notify and when. And you can add some other options in here. Is the complexity of this gonna cause some issues? Maybe, but that's what we're here for. And really it's just a flow from that green button at the top down to that red button, right? So that start at the top is the green button, and then it goes through and analyzes certain things that you've put in there. Does it have this label? Yes or no? Is the severity this high? Yes or no? And you can branch off of what it does from there. All right, we'll go into a live demo real quick, and then we'll talk about troubleshooting. All right. So this is my VM with WIN-911 and using that KEP server, KEPware. And basically, we will go ahead and start with the WIN-911 configuration. So we've already covered that you need to have your gateway set up, your connection set up, right? Who's getting notified and by what method. And then we have the tactic that you've set up. For me, I'm just doing myself to my mobile app, keep it simple. And strategy, made a basic strategy, and you can see that starts tactic, basic tactic. Any alarm state change, re-notify. Quick note, if you're going to use the mobile app, this option for re-notify on any state change, that must be selected, or else you're not going to get the updated state changes to the mobile app. So if it goes inactive or got acknowledged, you're never going to get that re-notification option to update on the mobile app. And then my stop condition, this is what most customers want and use, is when the alarm is acknowledged to stop that strategy. All right, so I've got my tactic, I've got my strategy, I've got my email, or I'm sorry, my mobile user as the person in the call out list in that tactic. Let me go to OPC and sources, right? So there's those 4 fields. Localhost, because I have it here on the same machine, but again, there is a browse and then the server class. So this browse button, this automatically senses any OPC servers that it can find, basically. And this is, again, where if it's on a remote machine, if your OPC server is on a remote machine, this is where all of the DCOM and user credential permissions, security settings, all these things come into play where you can't search for something. It doesn't show up in here. And again, WIN-911 is just a client trying to find this OPC server. So there's a lot of stuff on the Windows side. We do have the DCOM guide in the install checklist and knowledge base articles about OPC. So if you are having this issue, definitely go through that and change the DCOM settings for the Windows machine. But you can see when it's working fine and there's nothing blocking it, it'll find all kinds of OPC servers if they're available. And so you would just check the one that you wanted to use. In this case, we're using KEPware, KEP server, v6, and it automatically will put it in there, and you can save those settings. So we have our OPC source. Then next option is you can go into imports, and you can check any of the alarms that you want to see. And after you check the boxes for a few of these, you can make sure that this field here for each one of these, once they're all checked, you want to make sure that you drop down, and you can set these here. But as you probably are aware of, not all OPC alarms or values are going to equal the same thing, right? If they do match up and the alarm is in alarm when it's a value of 1, so be it. Go ahead and import all those, right? But you could have some analog ones that are, if it's above 100 or something else, and that's how you can set them up manually after you import them. We'll go through that in just a second. But once you select the ones that you want to bring in, and then you can select create alarm on value. If this doesn't apply, don't worry about it. And then you can select the import button down here, and it'll bring those in. So I already had a few of these imported, and then I just did these 3. These aren't really important to me into the demo, so just wanted to show you the import brings them into the alarms list. So if we click on one of these that we just imported, this is what it looks like. It's just the name. The source came from the OPC source that I labeled test. The item ID, right, that's your tag value. And then the update rate. Now you can give it a description if you want, but really the most important part here is once you import them, that doesn't mean that alarms are going to occur and notifications are going to be sent out. You have to go into the alarms tab and you have to set the condition of what makes this an alarm, right? So by default, this will be blank. I call it just an alarm. And what makes that an alarm? It's when the item value equals 1, right? And this is where you're going to set up, is item value less than something or equal to something or greater than any of these options, right? Maybe your tag is once it's above 100, you want it to alert, so you would do greater than 100 and save that. Okay. But for my test here, we just have it when it's 1, that's an alarm. And then you can see this is the strategy setting that you can assign to each one of these alarms individually. So maybe some of these alarms you have going to just a few operators, and you would make a strategy and a tactic to call them out and assign them here. And then you have some other alarms that go to a different group of people. That's where you would assign those alarms to a different strategy for those people. All right, so pretty straightforward. I'm not going to mess with the severity. You can if you want to in your system, obviously, but by default, it's just in the middle here at 500. And that is a basic alarm. So when value is 1, it should go into an alarm. All right, so we've got a test alarm, we've got a strategy and tactic, and we have myself and my mobile app in that tactic. So then we would open up the OPC server, and with Kept Server in particular, you have the quick client button that would launch this, and you can actually go in and write to the tags. You can see my value for this device 1 tag 2, which is the alarm that we just set up, device 1 tag 2. The value currently is a 1. So I was playing around with this and testing before you guys got on board, and you can see that we have that alarm in here. This is the log viewer. If you're not familiar with it, it's this red icon with the kind of paper and the search icon on it. And I gotta open that as a different user because I'm remoted onto this machine. But log viewer, it should say active, and then these are the alarms that are coming in and being processed by WIN-911. If you don't have log viewer on your taskbar like I do, it should just be in your recently used or down in the WIN-911 folder and log viewer. So that's this utility, and we'll get into some ways you can use this to troubleshoot here in just a few minutes. But quick overview while we're looking at it, we have the alarm point. The condition is in alarm, and the source is coming from that test, which is the OPC-DA source I configured. And this is probably the most important part here, is what strategy is it hitting. So again, if you're getting alarms but they're calling the wrong people, or it's not obeying what you put in your tactic, check this and make sure it's not hitting the default strategy or something else. If you double click into the alarm here, it'll take you through the notifications, right? So dispatching to Jeremiah mobile app and success. You can check if somebody's acknowledged it. The strategy execution, it's hitting the basic strategy, and that is starting the tactic, basic tactic. That tactic execution shows dispatching to mobile Jeremiah. That's the only one in here, but this will list everybody that should be notified. And then we have state changes, so it's just active and unacknowledged right now, and that's what that icon means. All right, and then I have a team viewer session set up with my cell phone. So this is my cell phone, and I can go into the mobile app, and you can see there's the alarm right there. Click on it, active unacknowledged as of what time. You can acknowledge it straight from here. And as long as my VM is working right, it should take the acknowledgement. Yep, it did. And because my stop condition is set to when the alarm is acknowledged, stop the strategy, now you can see it's gone. So it's no longer in the list. The strategy is over. And we can come back here and do an asynchronous write, set this back to 0 so it's no longer an alarm on the SCADA. Again, no acknowledgements will ever reach back and write to an OPC server. That's not the way OPC works. We just get an updated value and we create that alarm within WIN-911. All right, so let's do this again fresh real quick. So that alarm is gone and nothing is in log viewer, and we're just waiting for alarms. Something goes active in the SCADA and we get that updated value. And again, this is only because I have this value of 1 is an alarm that makes it come into WIN-911, and then it generates and creates the notification and alarm itself from WIN-911. And we see it in the mobile app. Now, because my stop condition is set to when alarm is acknowledged, it stops everything and they clear. You know, kind of prove that and show you that if I were to go back and make this inactive, it's no longer in alarm. We should get an update that it goes to a green triangle here that's inactive but unacknowledged. So it's still going to be calling people, all the people in the tactic for that call out list, because just because it went inactive doesn't mean the strategy's over. It's got to be acknowledged, right? So we have inactive unacknowledged, and then we can acknowledge it here, and that should do the stop condition to stop the strategy and clear the alarm, and nobody else gets bothered by it. All right, so that's it for the demo, and talk about a couple of other things about troubleshooting with the log viewer. So again, there's that icon. You can search for log viewer if your machine has search and index on. Check the status of alarms. You can see the status like I showed you. Acknowledge alarms through the log viewer if you want. Verify which strategy and tactic it called upon, and see any notifications that it's going to each person in that call out list. So just like we were looking at, we have the alarms, the top notifications next to that. Auto update is just basically saying the actual active alarms that we're still processing. You can uncheck that and see the historic information. In here we have the icons that show you whether it's active unacknowledged or inactive unacknowledged. The alarm point, this one is showing iFix as the source, but you get the idea here where it came from and which strategy it's hitting. You can search by date time if you're looking for something that happened a couple days ago over the weekend. And then at the bottom, you can acknowledge the entire page or check the box next to one acknowledge selected. This is the other tab next to alarms, which is called notifications. And this you can see that you can search for the most recent one and acknowledgement, filter by date time as well. But more importantly for this one is seeing the list of everybody who is notified, right? So alarm is active, it starts emailing, and then it went inactive, but it's still not acknowledged, so it goes through and keeps sending out those emails. And that's just a list of everything that's happening in the notifications side of the house here. So this is when you want to get more details about one of those alarms specifically, you can double click one of them. And like we just went through who is notified and how on the notifications tab, when or if it was acknowledged, which strategy was used, which tactic did that call upon, and then any change of state. All right, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. So now we're gonna open it up to some questions that you guys might have. We can dig into something more technically, any issues you guys are running into or troubleshooting steps that you guys might be interested in. So feel free to unmute yourself or type into the questions section if you have anything, and we'll go through it.